Week 5, Overview, Developments during the Viking Age. For years, my son had 2 bumper stickers on his car. One read, "It takes a Viking to raise a village." The other was, "Proud to be an American, a Viking colony since 1000. This week, we're going to learn about these savage tribes that shaped Northern Europe and beyond. We learned about Charlemagne last week. His reign saw a brief renaissance of learning and culture. But after he died, his grandsons squabbled amongst themselves and his empire fell apart. With such internal divisions, Europe was poorly prepared for the waves of raiders from the north that plundered its coastlines and rivers. It all began in 793 with a Viking raid on the monastery of Lindisfarne, on the shores of northern England. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records this thus: "In this year fierce foreboding omens came over the land of Northumbria. There were excessive whirlwinds, lightning storms, and fiery dragons were seen flying in the sky. These signs were followed by a great famine, and on January 8th of the same year, the ravaging of heathen men destroyed God's church at Lindisfarne." That first raid on the monastery was soon followed by others, and then more and more. No sooner would a community make progress towards order and prosperity than fierce Norsemen would appear in the night to kill, destroy, and steal what little wealth the parish church had collected, or what few crops had been stored up in barns. In the struggle just to survive, many previous advances of civilization were lost to Western Europe. Except in monasteries, study all but ceased, and towns that had no defenses disappeared altogether. The descendants of the skilled men who had enjoyed the safety and order of the Roman Empire and had worked to create beautiful buildings, paintings, jewelry, and churches now had to work hard every day just to feed themselves and their families. Craftsmen ceased making beautiful things and turned to tilling the ground, or were forced to fight in petty battles as feudal lords fought one another for mastery over small patches of land. If we're going to study the Vikings, we're going to have to cover a lot of geography. These people were world travelers. There are their ancestral homelands of Scandinavia, the modern countries of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. There are the seas that surround the Scandinavian peninsula, the North Sea that separates it from Britain, the Baltic Sea that separates it from Germany. There are also all the lands the Vikings attacked or conquered. These include Iceland, Greenland, and a place they called Vinland, which, as far as we can tell, was North America. Some Vikings traveled the river of Russia all the way down to the Black Sea. Some of the Russian czars had Viking blood in their veins. The Northmen went as far south as Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. The Normans, descended from the Vikings, conquered England in the north and Sicily in the south. Scandinavian geography, perhaps, had a lot to do with why the Vikings traveled so far. It's hard to grow crops in Norway. One area that received wave after wave of Viking invasions was Britain, just across the North Sea from their Scandinavian homeland. In the early years of the Viking era, there were many small kingdoms on the island of Britain. One of them was the West Saxon kingdom of Wessex. In the late 800s, the east coast of Britain was overrun by Vikings from Denmark. A young prince named Alfred took the throne of Wessex, but the Danes wiped out his forces, leaving Alfred and a little band of men fighting for their lives in the forests and swamps of Britain. Alfred is supposed to have disguised himself as a minstrel to sneak inside the Danish king's camp to learn his plans. Whether the legend is true or not, he won a decisive victory over the Danes at the Battle of Edington. The Danish king was baptized as a Christian, with Alfred as his new godfather. Instead of trying to drive the Vikings out of Britain, though, Alfred welcomed the newly Christian Danes as brothers. They ruled the Danelaw to the north, and Alfred ruled as king of the Angles and Saxons to the south. The Vikings didn't stop with Britain, though. They pushed west, settling Iceland, Greenland, and beyond. According to traditions, a ship that was sailing from Iceland to Greenland was blown off course and caught sight of lands further west. It was late in the year, however, and the captain didn't want to spend a winter there, so he sailed east to Greenland instead. The captain told his story to Leif Erikson, who bought the ship and sailed west to the new land. For many years, the stories of a Viking discovery of America were dismissed as old wives' tales, but archaeologists have found physical evidence of Viking presence in North America. They apparently made some attempt to settle there, but never established any permanent habitation. It would be almost 500 years before Europeans found their way to America again. The Vikings attacked Constantinople, capital of the Byzantine Empire, and amazingly enough, they attacked from the east as well as the west. Using light, narrow boats, Swedish Vikings worked all the way down through Russia to the Black Sea and attacked Constantinople in 838. The Normans came round the Atlantic, across the Mediterranean, and hit Constantinople from the west in 860. Your older students may be reading Beowulf. If you've been studying Vikings all week, this is great stuff, packed with heroes, monsters, and death-defying acts. If you don't know anything about Viking culture, though, it can be hard to follow or appreciate. Here's the plot of Beowulf. The Viking lord, Hrothgar, built a great hall for his men called Heorot. Then a hideous beast named Grendel came to attack it. Nobody can save the good guys from this man-eating monster until Beowulf arrives and offers to fight him. Grendel arrives and eats one of the men before Beowulf lays hold of the creature. They wrestle until Beowulf rips off Grendel's arm. The beast retreats, mortally wounded, to die in his underwater lair. So everybody's happy back at Heorot, and Hrothgar adopts Beowulf as a son. But Grendel isn't the only monster in this epic. His mother is worse than he is. Grendel's mother attacks Heorot to avenge her son after the manner of Germanic blood feuds. In the mother of all undersea battles, Beowulf dives down into her watery lair to rescue Heorot again. After great rejoicing, Beowulf goes home to his own people, the Geats. He rules the Geats for 50 years. Well, then somebody accidentally stumbles on the treasure hoard of a great dragon and steals from it. The dragon, in his anger, begins to attack Beowulf's people. Beowulf puts on his weapons once again to save them. One young warrior, among all of Beowulf's companions, Wiglaf, comes to his lord's aid when all the others have fled. Together, the two manage to destroy the dragon. Beowulf strikes the final blow, but at great cost. He's mortally wounded. Wiglaf stays with him until the end and shows him the treasure that his blood has worn. Wiglaf then rounds up Beowulf's cowardly followers, rebukes them, and calls upon them to help him make Beowulf's funeral. They burn the body on a great pyre and raise a mound as a tribute, burying the hero with much treasure, honor, and many tears. For a Viking, it doesn't get much better than this. Adventure, battle, glory, honor, old age, victory, treasure, and a hero's death. What more could a Viking want? The Vikings worshipped gods of war. There was Woden, chief of the gods, father of Thor, the god of thunder. Wednesday is Woden's day, and Thursday is Thor's. Friday is named for the god Frey, or his twin sister Freya, the goddess of fertility. The home of the gods was supposed to be Asgard. Vikings believed that if they died fighting, they would go to a hall in Asgard called Valhalla, where they would fight all day and feast all night. That sounded good to Viking warriors, but there was a downside to the Viking vision of the afterlife. Viking beliefs were unlike most other religions. The Vikings believed their gods were doomed to ultimate destruction. They expected a final battle between the forces of chaos and order. In that last battle, the Battle of Ragnarok, chaos was sure to triumph, and all the gods and heroes would die. Christian missionaries brought a different message to the Vikings. They taught that one God had already triumphed over chaos, and that his Son, Jesus, would raise his own to life everlasting. The conversion of the Vikings took a couple of centuries, but by 1100 Christianity was well established in most of the Viking lands, and thus the Vikings ceased to menace Europe. One place where Vikings turned to Christ was the island of Britain. King Canute of the Danes conquered England in 1016. Canute ruled Denmark, Norway, and England. Although Canute's warriors were largely pagan, he seems to have been a fairly sincere Christian. He repaired the English churches and monasteries that had been looted by his armies, and he built new ones. He gave many gifts to the English church. He even made a pilgrimage to Rome in 1027. Canute was the first Viking to be accepted as a civilized Christian king. 50 years after Canute conquered England, another Viking descendant took the throne of England, and kept it. William the Conqueror was a Norman, descended from the Northmen who had raided the French coast and finally settled there. The Norman conquest ended the period we think of as the Viking Age. The Viking Age didn't end by getting rid of the Vikings. They were converted, not defeated. Vikings like Canute accepted Christianity and adopted the feudal form of government that Europeans had developed to defend themselves from the Viking threat. By the time of William the Conqueror, the wild men of the north had become an integral part of Christendom.